911, what's the address of the emergency?
Oh, ma'am, I don't know the address. I just came.
Okay, what is the apartment number? Do you know if that has a building number?
I could go downstairs and check. 1 second, please.
Tell me exactly what happened. Okay, on the phone.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Oh, we're going to continue to update the units, all right? Continue to stay on the line with me.
Yes, I'm here.
How old is she? Continue to stay on the line with me, okay?
What do you see when you open the door?
Her body, blood, and when I walked in, and then 1,000 thoughts run through your head at that point, because like I just walked in on a girl that I deal with, dead body, and it's just like I immediately like even walked out, and I'm like, nah, I gotta call the police. I cannot leave her here like this.
On July 13th, 2022, 23-year-old Kayla Hodgson was stabbed to death in her own apartment in Tamarack, Florida. The killer didn't break in. Kayla opened the door herself at 5 a.m., and the person standing outside hadn't just shown up randomly. They'd flown over 1,000 miles, created a fake identity, and spent 3 days planning exactly how to get inside that apartment without being traced. But the murder wasn't even the strangest part of what happened that morning. Because after killing Kayla, the killer didn't run. They stayed. They changed into Kayla's clothes. And then they walked out of the building wearing a dead woman's outfit, believing they'd gotten away with it. They hadn't. Sakina Thompson was 31 years old, living in Springfield Gardens, Queens. She had no violent criminal history, no prior convictions, nothing that would have flagged her as dangerous. But she had one problem she couldn't let go of. Her ex-boyfriend had moved on. He was dating someone else now, a 23-year-old named Kayla Hodgson who lived in Florida. And Sakina had been watching. For months, she'd been monitoring Kayla's social media, scrolling through her posts, looking at her photos, seeing updates about the relationship. And then one day, Kayla blocked her. That block wasn't a boundary. In Sakina's mind, it was a declaration of war. Sakina tried to reach out through other accounts. She tried to find ways around the block. She sent messages to mutual connections. She left comments on posts she could still see. Nothing worked. Kayla had cut off all access. And for someone who'd spent months obsessing over every detail of this woman's life, that silence was unbearable. The messages failed. So Sakina escalated. She started Googling flight prices from New York to Fort Lauderdale, the Tamarack Village Apartments address, maps of the complex, street views. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was planning. She pulled up Kayla's social media archive, the posts she'd saved before being blocked, and studied them for location details. Where did Kayla work? Where did she go? What was her routine? But research doesn't bring someone to your door. It just shows you where their door is. So Sakina made a decision that would destroy her life. She was going to Florida. On July 10th, 2022, Sakina boarded a flight from New York to Fort Lauderdale. She checked into a hotel near Tamarack. And then she did something that proved this wasn't a spontaneous decision. She created a fake Uber account under a false name. Why? Because she knew what she was planning to do would require transportation that couldn't be traced back to her real identity. She packed a hat, a COVID mask, items that would hide her face from security cameras. She wasn't going to Florida to talk. She was going to Florida to make Kayla disappear. But she had one more problem. She didn't know exactly when Kayla would be alone. She didn't know when the boyfriend would be gone. She didn't know if there would be witnesses in the hallway. So she waited. For 3 days, she waited in that hotel room, watching, planning. And by the early morning of July 13th, she'd run out of patience. At 4:30 a.m., she ordered a ride on her fake Uber account. Destination, Tamarack Village Apartments. And that's when she made the decision that would end Kayla Hodgson's life. Kayla Hodgson was 23 years old. She worked, she had friends, she posted fashion photos on Instagram. She was dating someone who made her happy. That's it. That's all she was doing. Living her life. Setting boundaries with people who made her uncomfortable. Blocking someone who wouldn't leave her alone. She had no idea that person was standing outside her apartment at 5 a.m. When Kayla heard the knock, she probably thought it was her boyfriend. or a neighbor with an emergency, or a delivery that came early. She opened the door in her pajamas, half asleep, confused. And Sakina forced her way inside. What happened next was reconstructed by forensic investigators from blood spatter patterns, the position of furniture, and the defensive wounds on Kayla's hands. The blood evidence told a clear story, high-velocity spatter on the wall behind where Kayla had been standing, showing the force of the attack. Cast-off patterns on the ceiling from the knife being raised and brought down repeatedly. And most damning, arterial spray that formed a directional pattern, proving Kayla had been backing toward the bedroom, retreating, trying to get away. On Kayla's hands, investigators found defensive wounds, deep cuts across her palms and the backs of her fingers. The kind of injuries you get when you raise your hands to block a knife coming at your face. She fought. She tried to protect herself. But Sakina had a knife. And Sakina had spent 3 days building up the rage to use it. The attack was one-sided. Brutal. Over in minutes. Kayla Hodgson died in her own apartment, killed by someone she'd never met in person. Someone whose only connection to her was a man they'd both dated. Someone who'd flown 1,000 miles because a social media block felt like a personal attack. And then came the part that sealed Sakina's fate. Instead of running, she stayed. She walked into Kayla's bedroom. She opened the closet. She picked out clothes. And she changed, right there in the apartment, with Kayla's body still on the floor. She took off her own blood-soaked clothing and put on Kayla's jeans, Kayla's shirt, Kayla's shoes. Why? Investigators would lay to their eyes she thought it would help her blend in if anyone saw her leaving. If she looked like she belonged there, like she was Kayla, maybe nobody would ask questions. Then she attempted to clean the scene. She grabbed towels and tried to wipe up blood. She threw evidence in the trash. She believed she was erasing herself from the apartment. She wasn't. Blood is almost impossible to completely remove. Luminol would later reveal exactly where she'd stepped, where she'd touched, where she'd tried to clean. DNA doesn't disappear because you wiped it with a towel. And the clothes she took off, the ones soaked with Kayla's blood, she didn't destroy them. She took them with her. At 6 a.m., Sakina walked out of the building. She was wearing a dead woman's clothes. She had blood evidence in her bag. She got into her fake Uber and went back to her hotel. And she thought she'd gotten away with it. But Tamarack police were already several steps ahead. The 911 call came at 3 p.m. on July 13th. An unresponsive woman in apartment 204. When first responders arrived, they found Kayla's body. And they found something else, a crime scene that looked like someone had tried very hard to clean it up. That's when the case stopped being a local murder and became a manhunt. Tamarack Village Apartments had security cameras in the hallways and at the entrances. Investigators pulled the footage. And there she was, a woman in a hat and COVID mask entering the building at 5:07 a.m. Alone. Walking straight to apartment 204 like she knew exactly where she was going. The cameras captured her leaving at 5:58 a.m. Same hat, same mask, but different clothes. An investigator noticed it immediately. The woman who entered was wearing dark pants. The woman who left was wearing jeans and a light-colored top. And those clothes matched what Kayla Hodgson had posted on Instagram 2 days earlier. But the cameras didn't show a face. They didn't show a name. They just showed a figure in a mask, moving quickly, trying to stay out of view. So investigators started pulling exterior footage. The parking lot. The street. And that's when they found the Uber drop-off. The Uber account was fake, registered under a false name, linked to a burner email. But what Sakina didn't understand is that Uber's back-end systems don't care what name you put in. Every ride generates metadata that's almost impossible to fake, GPS coordinates logged every few seconds, cell tower triangulation data showing which towers the phone pinged during the trip, and device fingerprinting that identifies the specific phone's MAC address and hardware ID. That GPS data showed the pickup location, a hotel 3 miles from the apartment complex. The account had been created on July 10th, 3 days before the murder. It had been used exactly 4 times, all trips between the same hotel and locations around Tamarack. Investigators pulled the cell tower data next. Even if you're not actively using your phone, it's constantly communicating with nearby towers to maintain signal. Sakina's phone pinged towers near the hotel at 4:45 a.m. Then towers near Tamarack Village Apartments at 5:12 a.m., right when the Uber dropped her off. Then back to the hotel towers at 6:03 a.m. Her phone had created a breadcrumb trail she didn't even know existed. Investigators went to the hotel, pulled the guest registry, and found a name that didn't match the Uber account, but matched something else, a credit card registered to an address in Queens, New York. Sakina Thompson. Detectives started digging into Sakina's background. Who was she? Why would someone from New York fly to Florida and murder a woman she'd never met? And then they found the ex-boyfriend. The man both women had dated. The man Kayla was currently seeing. The man Sakina couldn't let go of. They pulled Sakina's social media activity. The searches. The deleted messages. The evidence that she'd been monitoring Kayla for months. And then came the detail that made every investigator's jaw drop. Kayla had cut off all digital access 2 weeks before the murder. 2 weeks between clicking block and a premeditated killing. While Sakina sat in her hotel room thinking she'd gotten away with it, her phone was pinging cell towers. Every call, every text, every app refresh. The data showed she was in Tamarack on July 13th at 5:15 a.m., right when Kayla was being murdered. But here's the mistake that would seal her fate. Sakina didn't leave Florida. She stayed at the hotel. For 2 more days after the murder, she acted like a tourist on vacation, ordering room service, using the pool, completely oblivious to the fact that investigators already had her name, her location, and enough evidence to issue a warrant. On July 25th, investigators obtained a warrant for her arrest. On August 3, 2022, police knocked on her door in New York. And the moment she opened it, she started explaining herself, defending against an accusation that hadn't been made yet, answering questions nobody had asked. She was arrested on the spot. When investigators searched her New York residence, they found something that made the case airtight: Kayla's clothing. The outfit she'd changed into and carried across state lines. Still in her possession. Still with DNA evidence on it. She'd literally kept the second crime scene in her own closet. She was extradited to Florida, charged with first-degree murder. Now came the hard part, proving it in court. The trial began in October 2025, 3 years after Kayla's death. Prosecutors laid out a case built on digital breadcrumbs, forensic evidence, and Sakina's own words. The defense had one strategy: claim self-defense. According to Sakina Thompson, she flew to Florida to have a woman-to-woman conversation with Kayla about their shared ex-boyfriend. She claimed she went to the apartment at 5 a.m. because, and this was her actual argument, she wanted to talk when it was quiet and there would be no interruptions. She claimed she knocked. Kayla let her in. They started talking. And then, according to Sakina, Kayla became violent. Sakina claimed Kayla punched her in the face. Claimed Kayla grabbed a piece of glass and cut her stomach. She was 2 months pregnant at the time, she told the jury, and she feared for her baby's life. So she fought back. And she blacked out. When she came to, Kayla was dead. Sakina panicked. She changed clothes because hers were bloody. She tried to clean up because she was scared. She threw evidence away because she didn't know what else to do. And she didn't call police because, and this was her explanation, she was too terrified. That was the defense. A 1,000-mile premeditated trip for a 5 a.m. conversation that turned into a blackout self-defense killing. The prosecution tore it apart. Prosecutor stood. Clicked to the first slide. Security footage timestamped 5:07 a.m. A figure in a hat and mask entering the building. If you flew to Florida just to talk, why did you create a fake Uber account 3 days before the conversation? Next slide. The Uber GPS trail. A red line from hotel to apartment. 5:12 a.m. arrival. If this was really about talking, why did you bring a disguise, a hat and mask specifically chosen to hide your face from cameras? Next slide. Crime scene photos. The jury saw them. Some looked away. If Kayla attacked you with a piece of glass and cut your stomach, where's the scar? Where's the medical record? The defense presented none. Because there was no injury. Next slide. Blood spatter analysis. Directional patterns showing retreat. If you blacked out and don't remember the killing, how do you remember changing into her clothes? How do you remember trying to clean the blood? How do you remember which trash can you threw the evidence into? The forensic expert pointed to the diagram. The blood patterns proved Kayla was backing away, not advancing. The defensive wounds on her hands proved she was trying to block an attack, not deliver one. And then came the moment that destroyed Sakina completely. The prosecutor played the audio from her initial police contact. Detective, Ms. Thompson, we'd like to ask you some questions about Sakina. I didn't kill her because I was jealous. The courtroom went silent. The detective on the recording hadn't mentioned a victim, hadn't mentioned a crime, hadn't mentioned jealousy, but Sakina had immediately provided the motive, the crime, and her connection to it, all in one sentence, before any accusation was made. That recording played twice for the jury. The second time, people in the gallery were shaking their heads. The defense had no answers. The jury had heard enough. On October 28, 2025, after just 1 hour of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict, guilty of first-degree murder with premeditation. 1 hour. They didn't even break for lunch. They walked into the room, looked at the evidence, and came back with a unanimous decision. Sakina Thompson sat in the courtroom, stone-faced, as the verdict was read. Her defense attorneys immediately signaled they would file for appeal. But legal experts were already saying those appeals had virtually no chance of success. The evidence was too overwhelming. The lies were too obvious. The premeditation was too clear. Now the only question left was, how long would she spend in prison? On December 1, 2025, Sakina Thompson stood before the judge for sentencing. Prosecutors asked for the maximum, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Before the sentence was handed down, Kayla's family members addressed the court. At least 10 people spoke. They wore Justice for Kayla t-shirts with her photo. They described a young woman with a bright future who'd been stolen from them over Kayla's final attempt at peace. A simple click of a button to protect herself from harassment. One family member called the blackout defense insulting. Another said Sakina had shown no remorse during the entire 3-year legal process, that she'd sat in court staring at them, taunting them with prolonged eye contact, acting like she was the victim. Then Sakina was given a chance to speak. In a rambling statement, she made one final critical mistake. She continued to play the victim. She talked about feeling disrespected. She talked about wanting to be heard. She talked about her pregnancy, her fear, her panic. She talked about everything except taking responsibility for flying 1,000 miles to stab a 23-year-old woman to death in her own home. The judge's response was direct. You traveled over 1,000 miles with the explicit intention to kill Kayla Hodgson. You planned this murder. You executed it. You tried to cover it up. The sentence is life in prison without the possibility of parole. At 31 years old, Sakina Thompson will spend the rest of her life behind bars. She will never walk free again. Looking back at this case, Sakina Thompson wasn't caught by brilliant detective work. She was caught by her own arrogance meeting modern technology. 5 critical errors that prove you can't outsmart science with overconfidence. She thought deleting her search history would erase the evidence. It didn't. Every Google search is logged on servers she couldn't access. Every social media visit creates a digital timestamp. She left a trail of obsession that investigators reconstructed months later, proving this wasn't a spontaneous act. It was a months-long stalking campaign. She created a fake Uber account thinking a false name would protect her. Instead, she chose the single most traceable form of transportation in existence. A cash cab leaves no record. An Uber logs GPS coordinates every 3 seconds and stores them forever. She literally drew a map from her hotel to the murder scene and back. While police were pulling her cell tower data and building a murder case, she was at the hotel pool. Most killers understand that distance equals safety. Sakina apparently thought out of sight, out of mind applied to modern homicide investigations. She carried Kayla's clothes across state lines and kept them in her closet like a souvenir. Forensic investigators didn't have to reconstruct what she wore. She gift-wrapped the evidence and brought it home with her. Most suspects wait for a lawyer. Sakina didn't even wait for a question. The moment police arrived, she volunteered the one thing they needed most, a motive. By denying jealousy before she was even accused of a crime, she handed prosecutors a confession wrapped in a bow. These weren't the mistakes of someone who got unlucky. These were the mistakes of someone who believed she was smarter than cell towers, GPS satellites, and forensic science. She was wrong. Kayla Hodgson should be 26 years old today. She should be posting new outfit photos, laughing with friends, building her career, living the life she worked so hard for. Instead, she's gone, killed because she set a digital boundary with someone who made her uncomfortable. She did everything right. She protected herself from someone she didn't know. And that protection cost her everything. If you're going to murder someone over being blocked online, maybe don't do it while leaving a 1,000-mile digital trail, creating fake accounts that keep GPS records, staying at the crime scene for 2 extra days, and immediately confessing your motive to police. But then again, if Sakina Thompson was capable of making rational decisions, she wouldn't have flown across the country to kill a stranger over an ex-boyfriend in the first place.